I almost burned this jersey this morning when I first heard the news. Not that the news surprised me, but the Cleveland Browns don't deserve Shedeur Sanders. Now comes news, not surprising, I predicted from the start, that Deshaun Watson will start, and it's not a week-to-week thing, that he has been given the job for the season by the Cleveland Browns. This sorry-ass franchise does not deserve to have Shedeur Sanders on its roster anymore. I wish there were some way that Jimmy Haslam and Todd Monken would decide as we near the season to get rid of Shedeur, to set him free, to trade him elsewhere, and I'm sure nobody would give anything more than what they gave for Shedeur, a fifth-round pick.
This Browns quarterback story has officially reached a point nobody expected. Because now, some Cleveland fans are not even arguing that Shedeur Sanders should start anymore. They are asking a completely different question. If this organization has already decided Deshaun Watson is their guy, then why keep Shedeur Sanders trapped behind him? And that is where this whole situation starts getting uncomfortable for Cleveland. For months, Browns fans wanted one simple thing. They wanted Shedeur to get a real shot. Not a guaranteed starting job, not special treatment. Just a fair opportunity to show what he could do with legitimate reps, legitimate weapons, and enough time for the coaching staff to actually evaluate him. But now that Cleveland appears committed to Watson, the conversation is changing fast. Instead of saying start Shedeur, some fans are moving toward then trade him. And not because they want him gone. That is the crazy part. They want him gone because they believe another organization might actually value the opportunity to find out what he can become.
6th round, 7th round, I don't know. I don't care. Would I love to see Shedeur in Atlanta? Do I think Shedeur Sanders, this coming football season, could win more games than Penix or Tua could win? And you better believe that I do. Shedeur Sanders is better than either quarterback that the Atlanta Falcons have right now that they're trying to decide between. I know they spent a high pick on Penix. Tua was a high pick and came with a high salary. I got it. But can you imagine Shedeur Sanders in Atlanta, GA? Can you imagine how that city would go crazy for this guy wearing their jersey? And by the way, this jersey was the 5th highest selling jersey in the National Football League last year. That was after Saquon and Jalen Hurts. Jaden Daniels and Josh Allen was 4th. Shedeur is the obviously most popular backup quarterback in the history of the National Football League, although he did start some games last year down the stretch.
That is a brutal place for a franchise to reach with one of its most popular young players. When your own fan base starts saying, send him somewhere else so somebody will actually give him a chance. That tells you this is no longer just a normal quarterback debate. This has become a trust issue. Fans watch Shedeur spend much of this competition working without every advantage the starting quarterback usually gets. They saw different personnel around him. They saw different opportunities. They saw Watson working with higher-level weapons while Shedeur had to prove himself in situations that were not always equal. And whether Cleveland agrees with that criticism or not, perception matters. Because once fans believe a competition was never truly open, every decision after that becomes harder to sell. Now imagine being Shedeur Sanders. You came into the league with everybody talking about you. Some loved your game, some doubted you. Some thought you should have been drafted much earlier. Others wanted to see whether your college style could translate. Fine, that is football. But what every young quarterback needs is an organization willing to answer the question honestly. Can this guy play? That is it. And right now, Cleveland fans are worried they may never get that answer while Shedeur is wearing a Browns uniform. Because if Watson has the job for the season, where exactly does Shedeur's opportunity come from? Does he sit and wait for an injury? Does he wait for Cleveland to completely fall apart? Does he spend another year hearing that he needs more development without actually getting enough meaningful reps to show whether he has developed? That is why this trade conversation has suddenly become so interesting. Fans are not necessarily saying some other team should hand Shedeur the keys immediately. That would be ridiculous. What they are saying is much simpler. Put him somewhere where the evaluation starts from zero. A team where there is no massive Watson contract hanging over every quarterback decision. A team where the owner does not have years of criticism attached to one veteran quarterback.
for the Cleveland Browns, and I thought he played pretty well last year. Pretty well to very well. He did beat Joe Burrow. He did beat Aaron Rodgers. He did win his opening game at Las Vegas for what that was worth. He was playing with what Pro Football Focus ranked most of the year the number one worst offensive line in pro football and the dead last worst receiving core in pro football. That's what Shedeur was stuck with last year. And by the way, this competition this year was so rigged that Shedeur was stuck with playing with backups, with third stringers and fourth stringers, some off the roster. There was one, he threw one pass to a tight end who wasn't ranked in the top four. He wasn't listed on the depth chart in the top four tight ends on the Cleveland Browns this year as they continue to rebuild. He didn't get to play with Concepcion or Denzel Boston, the two fairly high-pick receivers that Deshaun did get to play with in his first preseason start, and he was the starter from the start. It was rigged. I want to see Shedeur get a chance with somebody who wanted him, and I'm calling big baloney on that video that the Cleveland Browns released, courtesy of their videographer who followed Shedeur in. Remember the first day when he introduced himself to Todd Monken in Monken's new office as the new head coach of the Cleveland Browns. Remember that video? We debated it on Gridiron.
A team where Shedeur can walk into the building and be judged on his throws, his decisions, his preparation, his command, and whether he can win football games. Nothing more. Nothing less. And that is what makes Skip Bayless's reaction hit so hard with this fan base. His frustration is extreme, but underneath all of it is the same argument Browns fans are beginning to wrestle with. If Cleveland truly believes Watson is the answer, then keeping Shedeur around without a realistic path to play might help nobody. It does not help Watson because every bad drive will bring Shedeur chance. It does not help Todd Monken because every offensive struggle will turn into another quarterback controversy. And it definitely does not help Shedeur if his biggest opportunity this season is standing on the sideline waiting for something to go wrong. That is why this story is getting bigger. This is no longer just Watson versus Shedeur. Now it is becoming Cleveland versus the possibility that Shedeur Sanders might have to leave town before anybody really finds out what he can do. The biggest problem for Shedeur Sanders right now is not simply that he lost the starting job to Deshaun Watson. Quarterbacks lose competitions. Young players sit. Veterans get the first opportunity. That happens all over the NFL. The bigger issue is what comes next. Because if Cleveland has truly decided Watson is their quarterback for the season, then Shedeur could spend months sitting behind a player the organization has already invested years, money, and patience into. And that is exactly where Browns fans are starting to get frustrated. They are not just looking at week one anymore. They are looking at the entire season. What happens if Watson struggles early? What happens if the offense looks flat? What happens if Cleveland starts losing games and Shedeur is still standing on the sideline? Are the Browns really going to change direction quickly? Or are they going to keep giving Watson more time because they already committed so much to making this work? That is the question fans cannot ignore. Deshaun Watson is not just another veteran quarterback on a normal contract. His entire Cleveland story has carried enormous pressure from the beginning, and the organization has spent a massive amount of resources trying to make that decision work. So when Cleveland chooses Watson again, fans naturally wonder how much patience he is going to receive before Shedeur ever gets a serious look. And that is why this situation feels different. If Shedeur were sitting behind a veteran who was playing great football, there would not be much of an argument. You wait, you learn, you develop. But Browns fans have already seen Watson struggle during his Cleveland run. They have already watched this offense go through difficult stretches with him under center. That history matters.
Some of the other guys, I think Akib said, hey, that's a good sign, because Monken said, hey, man, how are you? Good to meet you, because, hey, we really wanted you in Baltimore. Baloney, they wanted him in Baltimore. They did try, Ozzie Newsome did call Deion Sanders to see if they could take Shedeur early in the fifth round, just before the Cleveland Browns took him in the fifth round. Baloney, Todd Monken, yeah, we wanted you. I could just see old Todd standing on the table, the campaign. We got to take Shedeur in the fourth round or the third round, or God knows, God willing, the first round. Stop it. They didn't want, but come on, man. And obviously, at that point, Shedeur is saying, well, I don't want to be a backup quarterback to Lamar for the next 10 years. I don't want to get to play only if he gets hurt. And so Jimmy Haslam said, we'll take him because they needed a distraction while he continues to grope and grovel and just screw up and make a bigger and bigger mess of his franchise after he gave Deshaun Watson a 5-year, $230 million contract guaranteed. It's the worst contract in the history of pro football. So this year, as Deshaun finally got healthy, coming off 2 Achilles reattachments, twice he's had the Achilles reattached. And then he had the big shoulder surgery on his throwing shoulder. And so over the last 5 years now.
So asking Shedeur to simply sit quietly for another season becomes harder to accept when fans believe there is still an unanswered question sitting right behind Watson. And that question is simple. What happens if Shedeur Sanders gets a real opportunity, not 2 drives? Not backup reps late in practice, not 1 preseason appearance with a lineup filled with players fighting just to make the roster. A real opportunity. Give him time with starting caliber players. Give him a chance to build timing with the receivers Cleveland actually plans to use on Sundays. Give him enough snaps for coaches to judge more than 1 mistake or 1 good throw. That is what people want to see. And if Cleveland has already decided they are not interested in doing that, then keeping Shedeur becomes difficult to explain. Because what exactly are you developing him for? If Watson is the starter now and Cleveland intends to stay committed to him, Shedeur could lose an entire season of valuable football without getting any closer to answering the biggest question about his career. That is why the trade conversation is becoming louder. Not because fans have suddenly turned against Cleveland, not because they want Shedeur handed a starting job somewhere else. They just do not want to watch another season where his entire future depends on somebody ahead of him failing first. That is a terrible position for any young quarterback, and it creates pressure everywhere. Every time Watson misses an open receiver, fans will look toward the sideline. Every time the Browns' offense stalls, somebody will ask why Shedeur is not playing. Every time Cleveland loses, the quarterback debate will start all over again. That is not a clean situation for Watson. It is not a clean situation for Todd Monken. And it definitely is not a clean development plan for Shedeur Sanders. So maybe the argument from fans is becoming less emotional than it first sounds. If Cleveland truly believes Watson gives them the best chance to win, then play him. But if the Browns also know they are not prepared to give Shedeur a serious opportunity anytime soon, maybe the fairest move is to let another organization evaluate him without all of this baggage attached. This is where the Browns fan argument becomes much easier to understand. Nobody has to sit here and claim Shedeur Sanders is already a guaranteed franchise quarterback. Nobody has to pretend he has proven everything. That is not the point. The point is that fans want somebody to actually find out. Can Shedeur run an NFL offense over a real stretch of games? Can he handle pressure when defenses start adjusting to him? Can he build chemistry with starting receivers? Can he take command of an offense when the game actually matters? Those are fair questions. And right now, the frustration in Cleveland is that fans do not believe those questions are going to be answered anytime soon. That is why another team becomes so interesting.
Deshaun Watson has played 19 games in 5 years because he's been hurt. He's also just been a basket case because obviously the Cleveland Browns gave him, Jimmy Haslam and wife, gave him that contract after he had been accused by 24 women in Houston, Texas, of sexual assault and obviously inappropriate conduct, massage therapists. 2 Texas grand juries, had declined to pursue criminal charges against Deshaun. God, no, not against Dion. But 2 had declined. So they said, well, yeah, we'll try this. And he obviously had to serve an 11-game suspension, and he had to pay a $5 million fine, go to a treatment program. It broke him because, he never owned it. He never really apologized for it or showed any contrition about it. I mean, that's the problem. If people are still booing him, he didn't help himself in making his case.
Shedeur does not need some organization to roll out a red carpet and tell him the job is automatically his. He does not need promises. He does not need special treatment. He needs a real evaluation. Put him in a quarterback room where the competition is actually open. Give him meaningful reps. Let him work with the players who are expected to be on the field on Sundays. Let him make mistakes without treating every bad throw like proof that he cannot play. And then judge him. That is what Browns fans are asking for. Because there is a huge difference between saying a young quarterback is not ready and never putting him in a position where he can show whether he is ready. And that difference matters. When Shedeur has been on the field, the discussion around him has constantly been intense. Every completion gets attention. Every mistake gets replayed. Every practice rep becomes part of some bigger argument. But young quarterbacks need enough volume to be judged fairly. One throw does not tell you everything. One drive does not tell you everything. One preseason game does not tell you everything. You need to see how a player responds after a bad series. You need to see whether he recognizes pressure faster the second time. You need to see whether he can adjust protections, find the right matchup, protect the football, and make a throw when everybody in the stadium knows he has to make one. That is real evaluation. And if Cleveland does not plan on giving Shedeur enough opportunities to show those things, another organization might look at the situation completely differently. That is where this can get dangerous for the Browns. Because another team does not need to believe Shedeur is perfect. They only need to believe he is worth investigating. A team with uncertainty at quarterback could look at this situation and say, why not? Why not bring in a young player who has already dealt with pressure everywhere he has gone? Why not see whether his accuracy translates with better protection? Why not see what happens when he gets regular work with the same receivers instead of constantly moving through different groups? Why not let the football answer the question? That last part is what makes this whole thing so frustrating for the fans who still believe in him. They do not want another debate. They want evidence. And the only way to get that evidence is to put Shedeur in a situation where he actually has something meaningful to compete for. Maybe he wins the job. Maybe he does not. Maybe he proves the believers right. Maybe he shows that he still has a long way to go. But at least then everybody knows that is a much cleaner situation than spending an entire season arguing about what Shedeur Sanders might have done if he had been given more opportunities. And this is exactly why some Cleveland fans are reaching the point where they would rather watch him compete somewhere else than watch him disappear behind Deshaun Watson. Because from their perspective, keeping Shedeur in Cleveland only makes sense if the Browns still have a real plan for him. If there is no path to meaningful snaps, no true competition, and no serious opportunity to evaluate him, then another team might actually be the best place for everyone to finally get an answer. And this is where Cleveland may have created a much bigger problem for itself than anyone expected. Because keeping Shedeur Sanders on the roster while fully committing to Deshaun Watson does not make the quarterback controversy disappear. It may actually make it worse. Think about what happens the first time Watson has a rough game. Not even a disaster. Just a bad game. A couple missed throws, a stalled drive, maybe an interception.
But the biggest reason people have booed Deshaun Watson in Cleveland, Ohio, is simply because he's been so bad. His QBR in the games that he has played for the Cleveland Browns is 33. It doesn't qualify, but it did. If it did, over that stretch, he would be dead last in the league. They're booing because he was awful. They're booing because they're cheering for Shedeur. They're not so much booing Deshaun at this point. It's not that everything's forgotten or forgiven or whatever. It's just so long ago. The booing now, the emotion now is generated mostly because they're actually cheering for Shedeur. Because, again, as people know, I'm the biggest Shedeur fan. And there are a bunch of Shedeur fans, but I don't know anyone bigger than me. And I have been on board with this. I wasn't a Johnny-come-lately to this. I was on board from game 1, 2, 3 in Colorado. Heck, I was on board at Jackson State. I just like the way this young man plays quarterback. I like the way he operates. I like his poise. I like his charisma. I like his command. I love his deadly accuracy. And most of all, I love his toughness. At Colorado, he got the crap kicked out of him. Game after game, they could not protect him, especially the first year, but really both years. He got rocked. He got ripped. He got knocked on his ass again and again. He showed me toughness. This isn't some spoiled rich kid.
Maybe the Browns lose a game they were expected to win. What do you think happens next? The cameras are going straight to Shedeur Sanders on the sideline. The crowd is going to react. The radio shows are going to light up. The social media debate starts all over again. And suddenly, Todd Monken is answering the exact same questions Cleveland thought it had already settled. That is the danger here. Because Shedeur is not some anonymous backup quarterback that fans barely know. He has a huge following. He has people who genuinely believe he deserves a bigger opportunity. And after everything that has happened around this competition, that support is not simply going to disappear because Cleveland puts Watson at the top of the depth chart. If anything, every Watson struggle could make it louder. That puts enormous pressure on everybody involved. Watson has to play knowing that a popular young quarterback is standing right behind him. Monken has to coach knowing that every offensive problem could turn into another debate about his decision. And Shedeur has to prepare every week while knowing the only realistic path to the field may come through somebody else's struggles. That is not exactly a peaceful quarterback room. And this is why trading Shedeur starts to make more sense from the fan perspective. If Cleveland is truly committed to Watson, then commit to him. But keeping Shedeur around while giving him almost no realistic path to meaningful snaps creates this strange middle ground where nobody really wins. Watson cannot escape the comparisons. Shedeur cannot get the opportunity his supporters want. And the Browns cannot stop fans from wondering what would happen if they simply gave the younger quarterback a shot. That question will follow this team everywhere. Imagine Cleveland opening the season slowly. Maybe the offense scores 13 points, maybe Watson looks uncomfortable, maybe the Browns lose 2 or 3 games early. Now imagine 60,000 fans knowing Shedeur Sanders is standing 20 yards away holding a clipboard. You think they're going to stay quiet? Of course not. And that is not even necessarily because they believe Shedeur is guaranteed to be better. Fans get impatient when they feel like they have already seen one option fail. They want to see something different. They want hope. They want the possibility that another player could change the energy of the offense. That is how quarterback controversies explode. The backup does not even have to do anything. Sometimes he becomes more popular every week simply because the starter is struggling. And Cleveland should understand that better than almost anybody. Once fans start imagining what the other quarterback could do, the mystery becomes powerful. Every bad Watson throw makes Shedeur look more interesting without Shedeur even stepping onto the field. Every loss makes the question louder. Every week, Cleveland refuses to consider a change can make fans believe the organization is protecting its decision instead of evaluating the roster honestly. Whether that belief is fair or not, it can become the story. And that is why some fans now look at a trade as a cleaner solution. Send Shedeur somewhere that actually has room for a young quarterback competition. Let Cleveland live with the Watson decision without another massive storyline hanging over every snap. And let Shedeur find out what his career looks like in a building where his opportunity is not connected to a veteran quarterback's contract, reputation, or past. Because there is another side to this that Cleveland has to think about. What if Shedeur stays all year and barely plays? Then you enter another offseason with almost the exact same questions. Did he improve? Can he start? What is his value? What did Cleveland actually learn? Maybe very little. And that is an entire year of a young quarterback's career gone. So the pressure is not just about what happens on Sunday. It is about whether keeping Shedeur in Cleveland actually has a purpose. If there is a real development plan for him, fine. If the Browns genuinely see him competing for the job later, fine. But if Watson is the clear answer and Shedeur is simply being kept around as insurance, then fans are going to ask why another team should not be allowed to give him something Cleveland currently will not. And here is the part that keeps getting twisted. Shedeur Sanders does not need another team to promise him a starting job. He does not need a franchise to hand him the offense on day one. He does not need anybody to guarantee that he is the future. What he needs is a team willing to actually find out. That is a huge difference, because right now, the argument from a lot of Browns fans is not, Shedeur is definitely better than every quarterback Cleveland has. The argument is, how are we supposed to know if he never gets a real chance? And that is exactly why a trade could make sense. A new team could bring Shedeur in with no promises at all. Tell him he has to compete. Tell him he has to earn every rep. Tell him he has to prove he can handle the offense. Protect the football, make the right reads, and win over the locker room. That is fair, but at least the door would be open. That is what fans are looking for right now. A real door, not a fake competition where everybody already knows who the organization wants to start. Not a situation where one quarterback gets the best group around him, while the other is trying to make something happen with backups. Not a situation where Shedeur has to be nearly perfect just to keep people talking about him. Just give him a clean football evaluation. That is all. And another team may actually love that opportunity, because the cost would not necessarily be huge, and the upside could be very interesting. You are talking about a young quarterback with a massive spotlight already on him, someone who has handled pressure before, someone who has shown toughness, confidence, and enough flashes to keep this conversation alive. That does not mean he is guaranteed to become a star, But NFL teams take chances on quarterbacks every single year. Teams spend draft picks on projects. They sign veterans hoping they can revive their careers. They take flyers on players with far less public evidence than Shedeur already has. So why would another team not at least be interested in seeing what happens? Especially if Cleveland has already decided Watson is the guy. That is where Browns fans are starting to look at this completely differently. They are not asking another team to rescue Shedeur. They are asking another team to evaluate him. Bring him into a building where he is not walking into somebody else's $230 million story. Bring him somewhere where the coaching staff does not have to answer for years of decisions that happened before he ever arrived. Bring him somewhere where the only thing that matters is what he does on the field. Can he process fast enough? Can he handle NFL pressure? Can he throw accurately when the pocket gets messy? Can he lead an offense when the game gets tight? Can he win? Those are the questions that matter, and the only way to answer them is with real football opportunities. That is why this whole situation feels so frustrating. Shedeur does not need people screaming that he should automatically start. He needs people willing to say, "We are going to give you enough of a chance to prove whether you deserve to." That should not be controversial. And if Cleveland cannot offer that because they are fully committed to Watson, then maybe another organization should. Maybe it is Atlanta. Maybe it is somebody else with uncertainty at quarterback. The specific team is almost secondary to the bigger point. Shedeur needs a place where the competition does not come with years of baggage attached. A place where every mistake is not compared to a contract. A place where every good throw is not treated like a threat to somebody else's job. A place where coaches can simply look at him and say, "Show us what you have." That is all Browns fans are asking for. And if he goes somewhere else and cannot win the job, then fine. At least the question gets answered. But if he goes somewhere else, gets real reps, wins the competition, and starts playing good football. And that is why this whole Browns quarterback story has reached such a strange point. For some Cleveland fans, this is not even about demanding that Shedeur Sanders replace Deshaun Watson anymore. It is about opportunity. If Cleveland truly believes Watson should be the starter, then they have every right to make that decision. But if that decision also means Shedeur has no realistic path to meaningful reps, then fans are going to keep asking the obvious question: why keep him there? Why not let another organization bring him in, evaluate him from scratch, and see what he can actually become? Nobody has to guarantee Shedeur anything. Nobody has to crown him before he earns it. Just give him a legitimate chance, because the worst possible outcome for everyone might be spending an entire season with Shedeur sitting behind Watson, while the same argument explodes every single time Cleveland struggles. That does not help Watson. That does not help Todd Monken. And it definitely does not answer anything about Shedeur Sanders. Maybe another team gives him that chance and he proves the Browns right. Maybe he struggles. Maybe he needs more time. But maybe he walks into a different building, gets real reps, wins a competition, and suddenly Cleveland has to watch a quarterback they already had start producing somewhere else. And if that happens, this entire story changes. Then the question will not be whether Shedeur deserved more hype. It will be why Cleveland never found out what they had while he was still wearing a Browns uniform. So I want to hear from Browns fans on this one. If Cleveland is fully committed to Deshaun Watson for the season, should they keep Shedeur Sanders and continue developing him? Or should they trade him to a team that would give him a real opportunity to compete? Drop your answer in the comments, and if you think Shedeur deserves a genuine chance somewhere, make sure you hit like and subscribe, because this quarterback story is nowhere close to being finished.